What happened to Native Americans when the Wild West ended? You already know. It ended for those here long before there was a West to tame. This is the story of those told the sunset was swallowing them. Let's begin your first vignette. You remember the silence first, because once the Wild West ended, silence was the loudest thing left behind. You can almost picture a Lakota elder standing in the cold morning air after 1890, listening for the thundering hooves of buffalo that would never come again. That quiet wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of a world collapsing. Back then, if you were one of the native families on the plains, the silence smelled like cold dirt and burned sage, and it felt heavier than any winter snow you'd ever known. Because before this ending, you lived in an ecosystem built around movement, the migration of bison, the seasonal shift of camps, the rhythm of nature. That rhythm was your economy, your calendar, your spiritual compass. And now, suddenly, everything was still. The context behind that silence was brutal. By the late 1880s, commercial hunters and government-issued contracts had wiped out nearly every buffalo in the West. You weren't just losing an animal, you were losing food, clothing, shelter, tools, religion, and dignity. Imagine someone taking every appliance, every paycheck, every family tradition, and every sacred object you own, and doing it all in the same year. Today, when you think about losing something or someone you love, doesn't your memory fall quiet first? That's how grief works. So let me ask you, if something you depended on completely vanished overnight, what part of you would go quiet too? But the next change wasn't silence, it was paperwork. Picture yourself being handed a document written in a language you didn't grow up speaking, telling you that your land, the land your ancestors buried their bones in, was now being split into rectangles on a government ledger. And the smell in the room wasn't sage or prairie grass, it was ink, dust, and the faint sour scent of sweat from the officials assigning your family allotments. This was the Dawes Act in action, and it didn't feel like politics to you. It felt like someone cutting the ground beneath your feet into pieces. Before the end of the Wild West, your tribe held land communally. No fences, no titles, no deed transfers. The entire concept of owning land the way Europeans did was foreign to you because the earth wasn't something owned. It was something lived with. The contrast to today is glaring. You understand real estate now. Square feet, acreage, property lines, appraisals. But imagine being told to treat your homeland like a stock investment when your grandparents taught you it was a living relative. By the time the ink dried, over 90 million acres of native land had been taken and redistributed to settlers. If someone broke your home into pieces and told you to manage it the way they do, not the way you've always known, would you still feel like you belonged there? Then came the sound you never forget. Boots on wooden floors, followed by the slam of a door closing behind you. And maybe you were a child when it happened. Maybe the smell of soap still reminds you of it. The industrial kind they used in boarding schools where native kids were sent to become American. You remember how the scissors felt against your scalp the first time they cut your hair. You can still feel the sting when teachers punish you for speaking your language. And the nights were the worst, lying in a dormitory full of quiet, trembling kids who cried into their pillows so the supervisors wouldn't hear. To you, this wasn't education. It was erasure dressed up as discipline. These schools were designed to kill the Indian and save the man. But here's the micro-loop twist. Today, you hear the stories of native languages disappearing, and maybe you've thought about the importance of your own mother tongue. What parts of you would vanish if you were forbidden to speak it? So let me ask, if someone tried to remove an entire piece of your identity, your pronunciation, your jokes, your childhood songs, how much of you would remain? The next vignette takes you to the edge of a reservation in the early 1900s. You smell dust. You see the faint wavering line where grass meets sky, and you feel a boundary, not a physical fence, but a psychological one. Reservations weren't merely locations, they were containment. If you imagine yourself living on a reservation after the Wild West ended, you'd feel the constraints immediately. Hunting, restricted, movement, monitored, religion, often banned. The rations you picked up weekly weren't generous, they were survival level. Flour, lard, salt, maybe canned meat if you were lucky. And the taste of those rations stays with you, doesn't it? Because it never tasted like home, it tasted like dependence. The original context was clear. The U.S. government wanted tribes settled, controlled, and civilized in ways that aligned with American institutions. But think about your life now. Think about the times you felt boxed in by circumstances, jobs, relationships, or expectations. You know that suffocating feeling when you want to move, but something, someone, keeps telling you to stay still. So here's your question. What would you become if the world forced you into a life that didn't match the one your ancestors built for you? After the Wild West ended, something survived. Something quiet but powerful. The smell of sweetgrass burning in secret ceremonies, the sound of drums at private gatherings, the whispered teaching of languages that officials tried to extinguish. These weren't protests, they were acts of survival. Native communities weren't only losing, they were adapting, rebuilding, holding on to the last threads of identity with a kind of strength you don't develop unless someone tries to take everything from you. Contrast that with today. Culture is easier to preserve, but easier to ignore. You have every tool in the world to remember where you came from, but do you use them? Tell me, what pieces of your own past are you still quietly holding on to, even when the world tries to modernize you out of remembering them? You ever notice how some endings don't feel like endings at all? They feel like long, slow unravelings, like watching a rope fray one thread at a time. That's exactly what Native Americans lived through after the Wild West faded. There was no single moment, no dramatic curtain drop. Instead, there were these small, grinding changes that reshaped every corner of daily life, until one morning you wake up and realize your entire world has been rearranged without anyone asking your permission. You can almost picture yourself standing on a reservation around 1905, listening to the wind move through grass that's too short and too brittle, because the soil here never really wanted to grow crops in the first place. If you kneel and run your fingers through it, it turns to powder, like a handful of crushed memories slipping through your hands. Before the Wild West ended, your tribe followed rivers, hunted across plains, and moved with the seasons. Now you're being told to farm, to plow, to plant rows of corn in soil that barely sustains weeds. And the irony stings you. The government gave you land that couldn't provide life, then punished you when you struggled to survive on it. The original purpose of reservations wasn't prosperity, it was containment. Out of sight, out of mind. You contrast that with your life now. Think about all the times people handed you responsibilities without giving you the resources to handle them. Times you were judged for outcomes that were never really in your control. Feels familiar, doesn't it? So here's your question. If people expected you to thrive in a place designed to break you, how long would you keep trying? But let's move inside now, into one of those old agency buildings on the reservation. You can smell dust and ink again. You hear the squeak of a ledger opening, and you see a man wearing a vest and round spectacles tapping a pencil against numbers that have nothing to do with your life, but somehow determine it. Every month, someone like him decided how much food your family received. Not enough to live well, just enough to live. The rations were predictable. Flour, lard, a bit of salt, coffee if the shipment arrived, sometimes rancid bacon. If you close your eyes, you can almost taste the heavy, greasy fry bread that became a replacement for foods your people had eaten for generations. Foods that were healthier, more sacred, rooted in the land you no longer lived on. You know that feeling, don't you? Eating something because you have no choice, not because you want to. The context behind this ration system was simple. When the buffalo were gone and hunting was outlawed, reservations became dependent by design. If a government controls your food, it controls your future. But the Wild West ending didn't just reshape adults. It carved itself into the lives of children, sometimes in ways that left scars you can't see but can definitely feel. Imagine yourself as a young native boy or girl in 1910. The air smells like the inside of a trunk. Mothballs, dry wood, fabric that's been folded too long. You're standing in a boarding school dormitory with rows of metal beds lined up like soldiers, and the sound you remember most isn't the teachers yelling, it's the echo of dozens of children crying quietly into their blankets. You're told your long hair must go, your clothes must go, your language must go, your name must go. When you try to whisper a word from home, you get punished. Maybe your hands are struck. Maybe you're locked in a silent room. Maybe you're told that every part of you, your songs, your dances, your ceremonies, is backwards, savage, wrong. But here's the thing. The government didn't understand. Identity is stubborn. Even when you try to bury it, it fights to breathe. Contrast this with your own life for a moment. Think about the parts of you that don't fit the mold. Your accent, your habits, the foods you crave when you're sad. Now imagine someone trying to strip all of it away in one afternoon. Let's move out of the classroom and into the world of the early 1900s. Because the Wild West ending didn't erase Native identity. It pushed it underground and then unexpectedly sent it on the road. You ever hear of the Wild West shows? Buffalo Bills especially. Imagine this, you're a Lakota man in 1902 living on a reservation where dances and ceremonies are banned. But a traveling show comes through, and suddenly the world wants to see you. Your feathers, your songs, your horsemanship. They want the version of you that the government is trying to erase. You smell horses and canvas tents. You hear the brassy snap of a bugle calling performers to the arena. You feel the weight of your regalia, your real regalia, against your skin, and for the first time in a long time, you feel whole. The context is complicated. Yes, these shows exoticized Native people. And yes, they fed a romantic myth of the West that never truly existed. But for many performers, this was the only place where they could speak their language freely, keep their traditions alive, and earn a living on their terms. Contrast this with today. How often does the world only seem to want a piece of you when it fits their image, when you're useful, entertaining, marketable? So here's a question only you can answer. If the world asked to see a version of you that no longer exists, would you perform it anyway just to survive? Now, step with me into a home on the reservation around 1915. Evening. Wood stove burning. The room smells like smoke, wool blankets, and whatever small meal your family has stretched to feed everyone. A grandmother sits near the fire, her hands weathered, her voice soft. She leans in close to you, whispering a story in your tribal language. A story she's terrified you might forget. Maybe it's about creation. Maybe it's about a hero. Maybe it's about your clan's origins. She whispers, because she has to. Because if anyone heard, she could be punished. And if you're caught repeating these stories at school, you will be punished too. This is how culture survived. Not through ceremonies in broad daylight, but through quiet. Exchanges by dying firelight. Contrast this with your world now. You have every tool, phones, recordings, documents, to preserve knowledge. But let's be honest, do you use them? Or do your own family stories slip through your fingers while you're busy surviving something else? So tell me this, if someone entrusted you with a story that held your identity together, would you be brave enough to remember it? Now, let's shift to the early 1900s political landscape. The Wild West era was long gone, but the government was still reshaping native nations, this time through citizenship. Imagine waking up one morning to learn you've become a citizen of a country that once fought wars against your ancestors. You didn't apply. You didn't sign anything. Congress just decided it for you. That's what happened in 1924. You didn't suddenly gain power or opportunity. You gained paperwork, labels, obligations, but your right to vote? Many states blocked it for decades. Imagine that feeling, being told you're part of a nation that still doesn't want you to speak, vote, move, worship, or live the way you always have. Think about your life today. Being given responsibilities without rights. Being included on paper but excluded in practice. Feels familiar, doesn't it? So here's your question. If someone claimed you were part of their world but never treated you like it, would you believe them? And now we step into a new century. Because even as the Wild West became a memory, Native people were laying the groundwork for something else, something powerful, something quietly growing beneath the surface. You smell sweat and dust from community gatherings where old ceremonies are trying to return. You hear languages spoken softly by elders who refuse to let them die. You see young people watching, learning, absorbing pieces of themselves that the world once tried to erase. And maybe, without realizing it, you feel something too. The truth that endings aren't always endings. Sometimes they're the soil where persistence takes root. Before we move on, I want to ask you one more thing. If you were born in a world convinced your culture wouldn't survive, would you still try to plant something new? There's a moment, somewhere in the story of Native America after the Wild West, where the air changes. You don't notice it at first. It's subtle, like the shift between late afternoon and early evening, a soft blue settling over everything. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear a heartbeat returning to a body everyone assumed was too wounded to stand again. Let's step into that moment together. Because now we're walking into the era where Native Americans weren't just surviving what happened after the Wild West ended, they were beginning to push back. Picture yourself standing in a small tribal community around the early 1930s. The Great Depression is in full swing. The world feels heavy. Even the light seems dull, like it's filtering through smoke. You're watching elders gather around a cracked wooden table inside a council house. There's a pot of weak coffee on the stove. The smell is earthy, bitter, comforting in a tired way. They're talking quietly, but you can feel the urgency in their voices. For decades, the Dawes Act has been slicing tribal lands into fragments like shards of a broken bowl. Every generation inherits smaller and smaller pieces. Your people are losing land the way a sick body loses weight, rapidly, painfully, visibly. But now, for the first time, something shifts. A new policy, a new idea. The Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. You didn't ask for it, but it shows up like a sudden breeze in a room that's been stale for years. Not perfect, far from it, but it does something the last 50 years never did. It acknowledges the damage. You see elders running their hands over maps where land is finally being returned. You hear younger tribal members discussing self-governance, constitutions, elections. You feel the hope glowing faintly, like embers being coaxed back to life. Contrast this with your world. You know what it's like when someone finally admits they hurt you, even if the apology comes decades too late. You don't forget the pain, but a small part of you wonders if things could change. So here's your question. If someone who wronged you offered a partial repair, not full justice, just a crack of light. Would you take it? Now let's step forward a little more. It's the 1940s. The world is at war, and the United States is desperate for soldiers. But something unexpected happens. Native men and women volunteer in huge numbers. You can almost hear the radio broadcasts crackling in the living room as families listen for updates on their sons, brothers, fathers. Picture yourself as one of them, standing on a transport ship, feeling the cold ocean spray hit your face. You can smell salt and diesel fuel. You can hear the rhythmic churn of the engine beneath your feet. You're far from home, maybe farther than any of your ancestors traveled. And here's the twist. In this foreign place, your identity, your native identity, becomes your strength. Think of the Navajo code talkers. Their language, once punished in schools, suddenly becomes the most unbreakable military code in the world. The same syllables once beaten out of children are now saving American lives. Imagine how that felt. The original context is painful. The government spent decades trying to erase native languages. Now those same languages are indispensable. It's a contradiction so sharp you can feel it cut. Contrast that with your life today. Think of the times someone dismissed something about you, your culture, your habits, your background, only to later need that exact part of you. So here's your question. If the world tried to erase your gifts, then later depended on them, would you forgive it? But hold on to that feeling, because the next moment is thorny. It's the 1950s now, and the scent of change in the air is mixed with something sour. You're living through the termination era, a government policy that announces, with cold certainty, that tribes should no longer be recognized as sovereign. Instead, Native people should assimilate fully into American society. Termination. You hear the word whispered in kitchens, murmured around campfires, repeated at meetings. It tastes like metal, like the bitterness of a wound reopening. The government starts dissolving tribal nations, literally declaring they no longer exist. Imagine someone doing that to your family, just stamping a paper that says, you are no longer who you say you are. You no longer belong to who you belong to. The context is harsh. Over 100 tribes lose federal recognition. Land is sold. Resources disappear. Thousands of Native families are pushed into cities under the promise of jobs, stability, and opportunity. But those promises fall apart quickly. In cities, the smell changes. No more wood smoke or prairie grass. Now it's asphalt, engine exhaust, sweat, and loneliness. You hear traffic instead of drums. You see strangers instead of relatives. You feel invisible, surrounded, yet utterly isolated. Contrast this with your own life. Think of the times you were thrown into environments that didn't match your spirit. Times you were expected to adapt instantly without guidance. But here's where the story catches fire. Because the more Native Americans were pushed into cities, the more they found each other. It's the late 1960s now. You're walking down a concrete sidewalk in Minneapolis or Oakland, and everywhere around you, you hear pieces of languages the government tried to erase. You see feathers, beads, long braids, moccasins, turquoise jewelry. People who were supposed to blend in quietly are forming bonds, finding strength. The American Indian Movement, AIM, emerges not from reservations, but from cities. Close your eyes. You can smell leather jackets and cigarette smoke. You can hear police sirens in the distance, but also the unbreakable rhythm of native drums echoing in warehouses and community centers. You feel a shift, not a whisper, not an ember, but a flame. Protests begin, occupations, marches, Alcatraz, the Bureau of Indian Affairs building, Wounded Knee. Again, these aren't just political events. They're personal uprisings. They're generations of suppressed voices rising all at once. They're a declaration. We're still here. Contrast this with your life today. You know how powerful it feels when you finally speak up after holding your tongue for years, when a single moment of courage cracks open everything you've been swallowing. Step through the 1970s with me now. New laws start passing. Laws that protect Native religion. Laws that allow tribes to run their own schools. Laws that return land. Laws that protect graves and artifacts from being stolen. You can feel the shift growing stronger. The smell of sage comes back into ceremonies that were once illegal. Drums are played openly again. Children start learning their languages from elders who waited decades for this moment. It feels like the sun is rising after an impossibly long night, but this isn't a Hollywood ending. It's not neat. It's not simple. Trauma doesn't disappear because a law changes. Many tribes are still fighting for land rights, water rights, and recognition. Some are still rebuilding languages one syllable at a time, yet you feel something undeniable, a pulse. The pulse of survival, the pulse of healing, the pulse of a culture that refused to die, even when the world expected it to. Contrast contrast this with your life. You have your own wounds, your own places where pain sits deep, and yet somehow you're still here. Somehow you keep getting back up. So here's your question. If healing isn't instant, if it's slow and imperfect, are you still willing to walk toward it? Now picture today, you're at a powwow, not a secret one, not a hidden one, a public, vibrant, defiant one. You smell fry bread and sweetgrass drifting together in the air. You hear hundreds of dancers moving in sync, bells jangling, drums reverberating in your bones. You see regalia so colorful, it feels like the earth itself is celebrating. This isn't a culture in ruins. This isn't a people fading away. This is survival turned into renaissance. And you feel it, don't you? That quiet, powerful truth. The Wild West ended, but Native America didn't, not even close. You ever sit with an elder, someone who's lived through more endings and beginnings than you can count, and notice how they tell stories? They don't rush, they don't force, they don't tidy things up into neat conclusions. They speak like the past is still happening in the corner of the room. That's exactly how the final chapter of this journey feels. Because when the Wild West era ended, Native Americans didn't get a clean resolution. They got a slow, grinding transition into a century that kept shifting the ground beneath their feet. And if you listen closely, you can feel every one of those shifts inside you, too. You start to notice the change first in the rhythm of Native communities after the 1950s. By then, the boarding schools had already carved their scars. The reservation systems had already drained land, wealth, and power. But a new pressure arrived, one that didn't look violent on the surface, but carried its own quiet danger: relocation. Imagine you're living on a reservation in 1954. The government announces a program. They'll pay to move you to a city: Los Angeles, Chicago, Denver, San Francisco. They promise jobs, housing, and a fresh start. You pack your clothes in a small suitcase. You say goodbye to relatives who have never lived outside tribal lands. And you step onto a bus that smells like vinyl seats and unfamiliar futures. But the minute you arrive in some concrete apartment building, you feel it. Displacement in a new form. The city noise is overwhelming. Cars honking, neon lights buzzing, apartment walls too thin to hide your homesickness. And for the first time, you understand that being forced to adapt doesn't get easier with each new generation. It just changes shapes. Think about your own life. You've moved before, maybe to a new city, a new school, a new job, and you know that disorientation, that ache in your chest when everything familiar slips out of reach. But something unexpected happened in those cities. Native people found each other. The federal government thought relocation would dissolve tribal connections. Instead, it sparked intertribal communities, urban Indian centers, activism, alliances that never existed before. Picture yourself in 1968 in Minneapolis. You smell cigarette smoke, coffee, and determination. You hear organizers talking about police brutality, broken treaties, stolen land. You feel the energy of a generation tired of being invisible. And you know what that feels like, don't you? That moment in your own life when staying silent becomes unbearable, when something inside you demands to speak. It's 1969. A cold wind sweeps across the water. A boat engine hums in the distance. You step onto that deserted, rocky island with other Native activists. The buildings are crumbling. The air tastes like salt and rebellion. You stand beside people from tribes you've never met before, united by a single truth. This land, this country, was built on promises that were never kept. For 19 months, you and others hold Alcatraz. You paint messages on walls. You give tours to journalists. You watch the fires burn at night. You feel alive in a way no government program ever allowed you to feel. And maybe you've had your own version of this, your own moment of reclaiming something you were told wasn't yours anymore. Think about that moment. Think about how it felt to rise up, even a little. And now we reach the present, the place where Native identity is no longer hiding in the shadows of history, but standing in broad daylight. Picture the modern res. You hear kids laughing behind tribal housing units. You smell wood smoke from a backyard barbecue, mixed with the scent of sage bundles drying in the sun. You see artists carving, weaving, painting. You hear languages returning, names returning, pride returning. Picture Native leaders in Congress. Picture environmental battles fought in courtrooms. Picture powwows drawing thousands, colors swirling, drums shaking the earth, voices rising like a heartbeat that somehow survived centuries of attempts to silence it. And yes, picture the problems too. Poverty, land disputes, health disparities, trauma passed down like heirlooms nobody asked for. Real challenges that still linger like old wounds that never fully healed. But the most powerful part? Native people are still here, still adapting, still protecting, still remembering. And that's the final contrast. The Wild West ended. The frontier ended. Cowboy myths ended, but Native people didn't. And that's where we leave this story. Not with a final period, but with a breath. Because this history didn't conclude when the Wild West ended. It kept going. And it's still going, just like you. If you enjoyed this video, click on the other videos on your screen for more.